Welcome to Leadership Unlocked, an interview-style podcast providing insights on how to lead people. Proudly brought to you by Human Interactions Australia. Hi, and welcome to the second episode of Leadership Unlocked. I'm really excited today because I've got Karen Lebsanft from Kurrajong Kitchen joining us. So welcome, Karen. Great to have you.
Thank you very much, Craig. Really good to be here.
So one of the things we're doing through these episodes is allowing you to do a bit of a plug for the business straight up front. So go for it. Tell us about Kurrajong Kitchen.
That sounds very exciting. Kurrajong Kitchen is now a 28-year-old business that started as a team of 2 and now is up to 35. We are a manufacturer of food, a manufacturer of Lavosh, a flatbread cracker for cheese, and we started baking 30 packets a week back in 1993, and we're up to 756,000 pieces per day. We're found in Australian pantries across the nation, served on chefs' tables, and when those airlines are flying, we are actually served there as well. So very proud to be so. As a group, as a manufacturer, we actually manufacture our product, we wholesale our product, and we also brand own and manage that. So we have 3 elements to the business these days.
Fantastic. So when you were doing 30 packets, I'm not sure you had too many staff on board. How many people? If I remember rightly, you were packing in the garage or something. Is that
we started in a little kitchen in a restaurant.
That's right.
And then we subleased downtime of the local bakehouse, and we started that at 3 hours a week. 1 day a week, moved to 8 hours a day, 3 days a week, and eventually it moved to where when that subleasing of that bakehouse, we were kicking their bakers out or saying hi and bye at the time, and we were coming in, they were going out, and eventually we had to buy that bakery to in fact keep Kurrajong Kitchen in a home as growth sort of was going, but we weren't ready to make that big jump out into our own premises at the time.
Yeah, right. So how many were there? Was it just you and your husband?
Ben, myself, yes, Ben and myself, and then we did have a couple of casual bakers, packers. The apprentice from the restaurant would come and bake with us, and then another lady who would actually come and help us out, who still is friends with us today.
Nice,
yeah,
that's nice.
Really nice.
So tell me, you've obviously grown. We've seen those numbers; they're massive. Think about, if you can think back to when it started to really kick. At what point did you go, we need to have more staff on board? Absolutely.
I think that decision was made around our lifestyle at the time. So when we went into Kurrajong Kitchen 93, we actually were a partnership, as in 2 people. We were going to be getting married. We never had time to get married, so that got delayed. But of course, as time went on, wanted to have children, got married, wanted to have children. So that determined what this picture looked like because of trying to find the inevitable work-life balance, which I'm not quite sure there is a magic solution to that. You just keep searching for that. But at the time, that's what we were doing. So out of that, I think my background was in fact in corporate, in banking, etc. And from there, I knew, structure, systems, processes, organisation charts, how those departments fitted together. So somewhere along the line there, we looked at what that organisation chart looked like in a big picture. And ultimately, my name was in a lot of those squares for a long time, as was Ben's as well. As the system, as we grew a little bit there, my day actually, or my week, looked like where I would actually allocate in a plan. Tuesdays was always HR day, when I knew we had staff and I have to look at who wanted leave or whatever that looked like. That was also payday, so of course that came around that. Thursdays I concentrated on, Thursday afternoon I think I concentrated on some reading material. Wednesdays was sales day, whatever that looked like. And so that's how I organised my time until it got a little bit busier, and then we needed to
change the names of the organisational boxes.
Definitely, absolutely. And the overload. And I can still picture myself today, and really conscious of it is, I was the lady, the owner, the business owner, who would walk in with a bag full, briefcase is what you would call it, potentially if you were corporate world, a bag full of paperwork, walk into the office like that and walk out of the office like that at the end of the day. And as that kept never getting less, I knew I had to pop people into different roles.
Yeah, right. Tell me your corporate role. What was your corporate role?
I started, actually, I left school. I wanted to be a maths teacher, surprisingly,
All right.
yeah. And my parents couldn't afford to put me through to year 12. So my mother promised me that if I didn't get a job out of year 10, that I could go back and do my HSC. Well, my mother had me a job at the Teachers Credit Union 3 days after I left year 10. So there you go. That was my future determined at that point. Moved up the ranks through then. So I came in as a junior loans clerk, went into a savings teller area, moved up the ranks into supervision, etc. And so always made my way up the ranks into leadership, and they were very good organisation at educating and learning and teaching their team formally what to do.
Yeah, I agree. I started in the bank and I ended up at a credit union at some point as well. I agree with you. There's a lot of training I remember back when I was 17, 18 and just in the bank.
Just from basic phone skills to customer service through to, whatever skill set that we saw. And I think it was invaluable because also too, we didn't come from learning on internet, or we didn't have everything at our hands, at our fingertips at all. This learning was where we got our knowledge from.
Yeah.
And the interaction with people as well. Somebody else in the room who could have that knowledge as
You
well.
realise you've just given away our age a little bit just then.
I openly say I'm a child of the 60s, okay? With wisdom that comes with that.
Exactly right. It's the wisdom that we can now count on. So go back to those days for a little bit. You've worked up as a fairly young person into some leadership roles. How was it managing staff when you were in your 20s? Because I was awful at it. I had a supervisory role, and I look back and go, I was a terrible manager.
I think, if I'm honest, I haven't had that question asked of me actually, but I think you're actually absolutely true, because you only know
what you know.
That's exactly right. And I remember being transferred to a department and where they really wanted me to apply for this role as another supervisor in another department, to bring my leadership skills into that. And there was certainly somebody I took on as my team in that, having got that role, who really didn't appreciate me being there. And I have no doubt I was really not, my skills to manage that person, to lead that person, to lead that team were not great. And there's a lot of learnings I absolutely can take forward from that, how not to. Probably worth a book there, isn't it?
Probably. Yeah. What are a couple of those, do you think? If you were to think back, what are some of the learnings of what not to do? If people are listening are new managers, maybe senior managers, okay, yeah, we know that. But if you were a new manager, what would be some learnings?
I think as a young leader, you think that potentially your way or the highway is the way, number one. And you think that asserting your leadership is in fact what you're being asked to do, potentially show that you have leadership skills. So to show you are assertive, potentially dictatorship, you have all this information from a corporate world or from above you that you don't necessarily know how to blend that into how to handle, manage people. I've become a much more collaborative leader these days, and I love collaboration. I believe everybody around the table has that opportunity to contribute to the outcome. And my role as a leader these days is to facilitate what that is, not to say my way or the highway. So dictatorship as a leadership style, not my way at all.
No, I remember, it's funny how certain things stay in your mind, but I remember I was managing about 22 people at an international organisation, and we were out for drinks on a Friday night, and this one person said, "Craig, you're so nice when we have drinks. You're a pain in the arse when you're at work." Yeah. And I think it was that very dictatorial, autocratic style.
Yes, autocratic. Thank you.
That took place.
Yeah.
And as a young manager, I didn't know anything different.
I wonder if it was, though, also to Craig, is that was the way you managed in those days. You were seen to be a good manager by utilising those skills. The person who was stepped up and was willing to go, no, yes, no, yes. These days, I think it is much more about collaboration, and we know so much more about, Gen Y, Gen X, baby boomers and all the other gens that come after that and what they can contribute. I do remember, though, as I moved out into Kurrajong Kitchen, thinking employing Gen Ys. Oh, Gen Ys, I don't want to work with Gen Ys. But I turned my thinking into what can Gen Y teach me that I don't know, and to make this business grow and become more of the collaboration, because I think somewhere along there I did realise this wasn't my business to grow. This was everybody who worked within this business to grow.
I think you've mentioned that before when I've interviewed you at a function, around that you're not just providing an income for yourself, you're providing income for many and many and many. And that's an intriguing mindset to have as well, because that puts a lot more pressure on you as a CEO or a leader. But if you have that mindset, you start to think about those people slightly differently, I think.
Absolutely. We always refer to Kurrajong Kitchen these days as the Kurrajong Kitchen family. Right. And I talk about that a lot. And it's ultimately as you would like your family these days, and there is no perfect family in the sense of a true family, but there is a respect for each other within the household, within the roles you play. And that same thinking, I believe, needs to come into the workplace, because the expectation is this is the structure under which we work, the business structure, whatever that might be, the corporate structure, the business structure, the output for the customer and our consumer is who we should be focused on. What that looks like and how we deliver input to that to get that agreed output is about how we talk to each other, how we feed. I always have a saying though along the way as I've talked to the team and go and present to them, in a toolbox meeting or a quarterly meeting where we're just saying, here we are, this is where we're going, because we're going this way in marketing. And with growth comes change, obviously, or change comes growth comes change. People have the opportunity to get off the bus at any time. And it's okay if the bus stops here and you want to get off. Sometimes there's a bit of a fear, do I get off the bus? And obviously my terminology there, get off the bus. It is okay to leave the business if it's not going in the direction that you actually want to go in. And I encourage anybody on that team, anybody as part of the Kurrajong Kitchen family, is to actually have that open conversation. This isn't where I want to be. Okay, where would you like to be? Can I help you get there?
So this is a really important point I think you make, because I think personally that leaders are not having those conversations enough to find out where are people at. Have they reached their point of no return, really, where they can't do it anymore. They can't handle the stress, they can't handle the pressure that's on them, and they would rather just be in an easy job than going on and going through this change. Did you find that you ended up having more toolbox meetings or more one-on-ones as you became more wiser as a leader? Sorry.
Absolutely. And I think I wasn't, I think sometimes those one-on-ones, those toolbox meetings, often leaders are fearful of them because they feel they have to be the one up there with all the knowledge to impart. But the knowledge comes from the group within. And if you're open to that and are willing to say, I don't know that, but let's have the discussion, or let's find out a bit more, or that's an interesting idea, how do we bring that to the table, and then apply it to where you think, where the business is going. I think something that we did, and this is only in more recent years, in all honesty, that has been invaluable to us. We sat down and did the journey of the purpose statement. Why do we exist? And then we set about our values and what that looks like. And we got the team together. This took us over 18 months to do. Big journey. Most invaluable contribution to the business ever, because some people did decide they actually didn't want to go on that journey.
Interesting.
And that actually, it enlightened them, it enlightened us. Some we had to make some tough decisions and go, you actually don't fit in that journey, and we have to show you that you don't fit in that journey. So how are we going to help you move away from this role? Others were, people are very excited when they, one, have an input and are heard and have a voice on that path they want to go to. When we talked about before, you were saying about where the business, I think, is going, I have, and why people come to work, I believe everybody's coming to work because they want a purpose. You know, they want to fulfill a purpose.
Yeah.
They want to be needed. They want to be heard. And we have such a cross section of a team, and being open to their voices can only improve us.
Yeah, the term I've heard is people want to contribute. In fact, Mimo said it in the episode number 1, is that nobody gets up in the morning and says, I don't want to come, I want to come to work and do a bad job. They don't, that's not what they're there. They'd rather do a good job, but things work out in such a way, whether it's not communicating, not being talked to, not being in a collaborative environment, things go awry at some point. And I think we need to, as leaders, check in and see where people are at, because otherwise all of a sudden we start to see bad behaviour and we think they're the bad guys. But in fact, what have we done as leaders to encourage that indirectly?
Absolutely. I think it's also important to understand is, and we've talked about this before, is if I talk about the DISC profiling.
Yeah.
Because DISC profiling is so incredibly valuable, and there's all different versions of it that you can go through. But as a leader, or as the top leader, if you determine that as the business owner, CEO, chairman, director, whatever you're choosing to call yourself, is imparting it to the next level. That middle management level is incredibly valuable, and sometimes we miss them. We think they should know more, and then of course we think they should know more, and then of course their team thinks they should know more, and then that is the investment where we should be making to empower those people there to be as open and as collaborative of the business, of the culture, of the team, to bring that. And I think never be fearful of bringing something to a table and discussing it. Conversation, you talked about conversation. I think that is such a lacking skill in life, full stop. Yeah. And that has come about from the good old phone, everybody's hand texting, the emojis now,
Yeah, you don't even have to spell anything.
That's exactly right. Funny, you could put an emoji in your face, and that's the problem, is people read the emoji on your face and they go, oh, yes. Or an interpretation of what you're saying, and may not get the proper message if only the words were spoken. And conversation skills can go a long way.
We're big proponents at HI around DISC. We love it and have used it for many, many years in different formats, primarily in a communication space, but teaching people really that other people communicate differently and it's okay. What's been your experience with DISC and using it? In what context have you used it?
We used it in the business sense. I've used it in a couple of different ways, actually. So one is in the business sense in regards to who my team members were, or what they needed out of me, what I wasn't reading, or nice. More so how I was interpreting something that they said, and they didn't intend it that way, but my own blinkers allowed me to interpret it in this way.
Sure.
But the more I knew and understood those different personality styles, I could then sit back and think about, right, what is that person trying to say? Let's get to the table, have the conversation. I've actually also used DISC in a networking situation, and understanding who's in your room when you're networking, who's in that group, who's at the table. And that can be even in a meeting space, where you're going, which often networking clearly is, but in a meeting space, if you're sitting around a board table, etc., and you can understand your fellow directors and their outcomes, because often something is said across a table, and if you take it just for the words that are said, the interpretation is misinterpreted. But if you look at the person's personality style, you can actually understand and dig deeper, so it allows you to ask the next question.
I think it actually allows you to ask a better question too.
It's a good point.
Because you're not just taking, for what you've got in front of you. You can go, hang on, if I understand this person, where they might be coming from, I can ask a deeper or a different question that might actually get to the issue better. So that's great. I'm glad that you're using DISC, because, as I said, we love it.
I do love it as well. It's just, yes, it's so handy when you know some simple tools how to look at somebody who you're in the room with.
Yeah, right. So you've got a lot more staff now. I imagine that brings more challenges.
It does bring more challenges, but I think, what we've just discussed is that I think I've learned, I'm wiser on how to deal with those challenges, and I impart that knowledge to my team who are dealing with those challenges in an open way. To, have you thought about this? Did you approach this? Have you thought about that? And we have a much more, I think, openness as well with my middle management team in regards to where they thought potentially they had to have all the answers. They know that they can come back and have a conversation. Door is always open. How do we talk about that? This is a problem I'm having. What do you think? Where do we go with it? As opposed to just trying to get an outcome for the business.
So you're seeing your middle management are an important level in any business, really, I think, anyway, but that's what I'm hearing from you as well.
Yeah, and I think potentially, if I say, look, we started 28 years ago, how I operated with those middle managers 28 years ago is so different to these days. And that's obviously from learning, from knowledge, from living and breathing, and realising, obviously, the journey of the autocratic style doesn't deliver an outcome for the business and for the culture under which I choose to operate. That doesn't mean that I won't make the final decision.
Yeah, that's right.
Cut if needed. Yeah. You know, whatever that is. No, not let's take this path.
Yeah, there's some not negotiables sometimes, right?
Absolutely, there's not negotiable sometimes.
Yeah, it's still your business.
Yes, but it's not. And this is actually an interesting thing as a leader. What I've learned, I talk about it in business, but I think it very much applies to leaders, is get your ego out of your business. And I say that because often it's a bit like what we were saying, gee, that leader has to have all the answers. They actually don't. And when I talk about this statement in terms of business, get your ego out of the business, because you're actually looking at what the end user, and in the case of the consumer, external customer, is looking for. So get your ego out of the business when you're dealing with internal customers, you know, your team. And then you can actually look at the whole situation, you know, the good old open questions, etc., going down that road. But when you think it's about you and the outcome is about you, there is no good outcome.
Tell me, person's not performing, how you would expect them to perform. How do you handle that now let's do this. How did you handle it previously, and how do you handle it now? Just so.
I remember, I can still see this picture in my head of years ago when we started subleasing that downtime of the bakery, and then we moved into owning that bakery at a period of time to keep Kurrajong Kitchen in a home. And clearly the pressure will do enormous things to us. Pressure got to me in regards to, and I had brought on this new supervisor who had some experience and in the bakery, in the retail space at the point. And I had a couple of young girls who were young casual girls who were working through, but they within the operation knew more than she did, and there was a disrespect coming through. And I berated those young girls. And I can still see myself and going, Karen, I would like to berate myself for berating them in how I handled it back then.
Yeah.
And going, and respect is my number one value. Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Respect is, I recognise that. But how you earn respect is not by how I did it back then, without a doubt.
Yeah.
You know, hindsight's a wonderful
Beautiful thing.
It is. Unbelievable.
So how would you handle it now?
Absolutely, you know, bring people to the table in the conversation and allow, and especially because age doesn't mean that you have earned the respect from just getting there in a business sense. If you're coming into an environment, there is a lot of people, and potentially at a 28-year business, who've seen so much and growth and changes and upsets and internal and challenges and successes on that journey. They bring a lot to the table. No matter, the individual brings a lot to the table, and our role as a leader is to extract what that individual brings to the table. So in terms of, it's the conversation to be had. It is the conversation, and it may not be one.
No,
just one.
I agree with that. I think I've seen people too who think they can do the job, and then if you haven't had the conversation with this person, and then you go and hire externally, you've almost given them a slap and said, thanks for your work, but it's really not that good enough. But maybe we with a good conversation, we find out this person's actually keen, and we can coach them and train them and develop them to be an amazing leader because they've already got this incredible business knowledge behind them.
It's such a good point, because I would definitely say at Kurrajong Kitchen, we did that, is that we did not, we would hire externally. Oh no, there's nobody who can do this. In saying that, I have an operations manager who is with us for, I think she's been with us 17, 18 years now. And she started as a baker, somebody processing Lavosh and packing it in the bakery in those 8 hours a week type of scenario. Maybe she was at the full-time stage by then. But she's actually now our operations manager, and we've brought her through and trained her, invested in her. And that's the key as well, Craig, is the investment. How much investment have I made into this person? And now understanding as well how far I can, by understanding the individual, I can actually understand how far I can take them. And when do I have to buy in skill set. And sometimes buying in skill set is not the answer. And bringing in a personality and a attitude to a business, bringing in somebody who fits with the culture. And I can certainly say that from experiences where I've seen somebody come into our business and I've nearly lost some key plays in my business.
Interesting.
By bringing in a skill set to take pressure off of me, yet their style didn't fit the culture of the business, and I was so close to losing these long-term team members that had more to give, that I actually, until it's staring you in the face. I managed to save it.
We're going to do a podcast with another person in the next couple of weeks, actually, and very similar story. This time last year, brought somebody in for skill set and peeved a lot of people off downstairs who had been here for not so long, but been here for a while, understood the culture. He wasn't a cultural fit.
No. And definitely always employ for culture. Choose for culture, not for skill. And if skill outweighs culture, I definitely these days go, no thanks, not at all. It's always about, and these days we actually bring people in an interview or have a discussion, come have a chat to us, and it's always about culture.
Nice.
It's not about the role to start with, it's about culture.
So if you were to, what are your two or three lessons you've learned about what not to do as a leader when you're talking about people, when you're managing people?
Don't put my ego in the picture, without a doubt. Okay. This is not about me. This is about the team, the outcome, the business, the project outcome, whatever that might be. And that ultimately is for a consumer or the brand, etc. So it's about, you are not that. That's exactly right. Yeah. You're not the brand, you're not the business, you are a contribution to that. You are a contributor to that as well. As is everybody.
Yes. What's the word I'm looking for? Some people call it you're the
facilitator? No.
Yeah, facilitator or the keeper. You're purely the person that's entrusted with it at the moment. You're overseeing that business now, and somebody else will see it. I know with my wife and brother-in-law business, often the kids laugh and joke about that they're going to come and work. And they're going to be this role, and the other sister's going to be that role. So we're purely just this, keeper of the asset or the trust at the moment.
That is so true, and we are first generation family business, and we've been going for 28 years. But there's going to be, and I always say we have kept it for 28 years. We've been entrusted with this, and we've got it to here. Just because I won't be around for the next 28 doesn't mean that the brand or the business doesn't deserve another 28 years.
So
and
true.
I know from a brand perspective, being able to say now that we're in the cupboard, and I get young'uns come up to me. That's a very old word, isn't it? Young'uns come up to me, and go, oh, my mum used to give me this when I was a kid, or pack it in my school. I go, oh, that's a reality check. But it's also a reality check of the brand has lived through this life with people, and Kurrajong Kitchen deserves to be an Australian iconic brand just because I won't take it there. But if I have my blinkers on and want to do it and keep my ego in the business, it won't ever get there.
It becomes very short-term thinking,
Absolutely.
Right? So you just said kids in the business?
Are they in there? That's interesting. Well, One's sort of on the sideline helping out. She's now, so I'm a grandma these days,
Yeah.
which is a nice thing to say. Beautiful little baby girl. And 2 children, so both their young 20s. So one helping in the business and bringing that social media knowledge in just from being on it. Oh,
Yeah.
you know, this is trending. This
You mean all
isn't.
the time?
Yeah, absolutely. Have it glued to the hand. The other one, interesting enough, and I've shared this story beyond at different times. So 2 children brought up in the business equally, you know, lived and breathed the business, which meant packing Lavosh on the lounge room floor if it needed to be, coming in. A story that I can share years ago, we actually, we'd given distribution out to a third party arm at the time. So we were concentrating on the manufacturing arm of the business. We were about to, and I can picture it now, we were going away for 2 weeks holidays, January, going away for 2 weeks holidays. We got to the Gold Coast. Kids were young, playing in the pool, had the week there, did, you know, the parks up there, etc. We were meant to be turning left to head for Noosa for a week. That was my week. The kids had their week. You know, we were heading to Noosa to have a nice week at Noosa. Had to drive out of that driveway and turn right to come back to Sydney because the distribution had grown so much. We had underestimated the growth and we had to bring everybody back from holidays. And the kids were literally sleeping under the desk at work while 3 a.m. in the morning I'm on the pack line on a Saturday night trying to get it. And that's growth and that's leadership and that's what actually happens there.
That's an interesting point as well. I don't really want to go too far into it given time, but that's a form of leadership right there. Is what are you teaching your children around a work ethic, around commitment? That's an interesting piece in itself, right?
Absolutely. So, just in finishing that story is so the young my daughter, who was actually on trade stands, you know, consumer trade shows at the age of 6, repeating my words for word, and who was offered $1 tip for her contribution to what she actually did, still is involved in the business. My son, who is 20 years of age at this moment, has completely gone away from the business and decided all of that pressure was way too much for him, isn't interested. And when he was 7, he's now 20. So we're in a trade show in Europe looking at machinery. And I'm going, right, okay, Jack, this will make him interested. Jack, what part of the business would you like to look after when you grow up? And he turns to me, looks up and says, Mum, I'm only 7 and I don't have to make that decision yet. Wasn't that a wonderful lesson to learn?
Fantastic response.
So we now support him in what he's doing, which is welding and Boilermaker, you know, out in rural New South Wales. And that's his life and will be.
Awesome. That's a cool thing. And so 2 or 3 major lessons, positives that you would say. What are 3 or 4 positives that you've learnt about being a leader and getting great responses from people? What are some things that you've done that people can take away?
I think the takeaway is it's about, you don't have to give all of you as a person on the line, but you have to be open to almost all of them. Yeah. So the open and the collaborative is one of the best styles that I would do. Be willing to step up though and make the hard decisions. You need to do that, but you don't have to deliver them harshly. So making a hard decision, the delivery doesn't have to be hard.
Yeah, nice.
So that is certainly a very well learned lesson. You have to accept responsibility. That I have 3 words that I play with: responsibility, authority, and accountability. And I think they are totally linked as leaders, how they actually come in. That's a whole other podcast, okay? But they are very much as a leader. If you think about as a leader, what are you responsible for? What are you accountable for? And what authority do you have? And how you use those, and they interlink, makes you a better leader. Yeah, ultimately, at some point you are responsible for something if you're a leader, and be aware of that.
So, next 28 years?
No.
That's happening.
Well, I can't fly off in an aeroplane overseas at this very moment. So these days,
Kurrajong Kitchen will continue being the force that it is.
Absolutely.
And not to be too cliched here, but I've said this to you before, I love Lavosh and Lavosh bites. We buy them all the time. I just love them.
Thank you. And that actually was one of our values we learned. and I can openly say, and I love to be able to say this, we've learned that one of our values is consistency is key. And that's a really good thing across product, but across leadership as well.
Yeah.
That's a great takeout for leadership. Consistency is key. And that's what your team wants of you, is consistency. If they know what to expect, a little bit like your story about having the drinks outside.
That's right.
You know? If they know what to expect, they can actually understand how to approach you or what type of leader you are. In our case, where I'm talking about is, in fact, the product of Lavosh. So consistency is key. Going back, our product is loved. It's not just enjoyed, it's not just served, it's not just eaten. It is loved, and we know it's loved. That's definitely feedback. So to allow it to continue to be loved, consistency is key.
Yeah.
And if you want to be loved as a leader, respected as a leader, approved of as a leader, looked up to as a leader, if you want to inspire people, consistency is key. When you go off track, that's when it's not.
Yeah.
So that's my message these days.
Beautiful.
I go out and mentor businesses, mentor
Yeah.
business
So
owners.
you I've noticed you're doing some other stuff for yourself.
I am these days.
So you can do your second plug on this.
Thank you. So these days I go out and inspire corporates in regards to speaking. So speaking to organisations and sharing the Kurrajong Kitchen story and leadership, speaking through podcasts, as I'm doing with you now, and also mentoring businesses. And I mentor businesses who are committed, got skin in the game, typically a product-based business, and often food, where they are looking to grow that next step. And you've got so far with the knowledge you've got, and you can see where you want to go, but you're a little bit fuzzy about what that looks like. And just having somebody come in and mentor, be accountable to that word accountability.
Yeah.
Accountability can play, can inspire a lot of people as well.
Well, fantastic. I hope it goes well for you. I've been watching with interest your branding on that around yourself.
Thank
and
you.
I've noticed you've attached yourself to being an Indigenous woman, which I didn't know about as well. So that's intriguing as well. So that's come up recently?
It has. I've only found that history in the last few years. So I'm a proud Burra woman of the Gundagara Nation. My ancestor, my great-grandfather, was in fact Miranda. Miranda was a leader, a chief, and he's been awarded a plaque by Governor Lachlan Macquarie, and that sits in Camden Museum.
Wow.
It's an amazing story. I feel very much, when I've looked into it more, my journey is very much aligned with him as a leader who brought people together, is what he did through, working with the new settlers, and then having to find a way forward. He fought for his people, without a doubt. He fought for his people, but he found a way forward. Interesting enough, the other side of my history is that we were first fleeters as well. So that's a really interesting story.
That's an interesting story.
So I think there's a few books in all of that.
All of that.
But these days, yes, certainly. So from myself, in terms of my speaking and my mentoring and my story, which is told in a few more words about that, can actually be found on my website, which is, of course, KarenLebsanft.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to interview you. I always have a good time with you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for taking the time today.
Thanks very much for listening, everyone. We look forward to hearing some feedback and you joining us in our next episode of Leadership Unlocked.